Okay, hey there guys. I'm continuing with our little lesson on starting to add a little bit more complexity to your ball incline project here. In this exercise, I'm going to talk about adding lights, adding shaders, not necessarily textures, but shaders, some things to get a little bit better quality out of this. And then of course the rendering process. So again, adding lights, adding shaders, and get a better animating process. So I'm basically going to work off the last little project I had here of this ball rolling down this incline, kind of slowing down, speeding up a little bit, and then coming to a stop. So the first thing I want to do to actually kind of make this look a little bit more interesting is I'm actually going to widen this out. And I'm widening this out because I want to really take advantage of some of the reflections that are actually going to be created using the software render. Now there is Arnold rendering. I'm not going to get into Arnold rendering just yet. Let me go ahead and turn on again my film gate or my resolution gate just to get a good angle on this. And let's go ahead and just by starting with, first things first, let's create some lighting. Now we don't see the lighting in here until we actually activate the little use all lights button right here. You see everything is black. So to create some basic lights, and I mean basic, not Arnold lights, we're going to use software rendering initially here. We're going to create lights. And I'm going to put a couple different lights on here. Most of the time what we typically deal with in a scene is we have 3-point lighting. So we usually have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. So to create the key light, I'm going to put a spotlight on here. See, spotlight. And you see what it does. It basically gives us, if I move it up, you can see that it's actually facing in another direction. But let me show you a cool way to set up our lights. Because right now here in the panels, you see we're actually in perspective. But watch if I look through this and I say, look through selected. So I have the light selected and I can look through it. I am now looking through that light so I can aim it properly. And I'm just going to zoom out. See this? And I'm going to hold an Alt and tumble. So this one's going to be our main light. So I'm going to back it off. And so you see, I'm literally looking through the light. And on the right-hand side over here, you see I've got some attributes for this light. I could also hit Control A. And you see it gives me things like I can change the color. So we'll go with maybe a little bit of a warm light or a cool light here. Okay, I can add a little bit more spread, penumbra, to soften that light. Maybe a little, play with the drop off a little bit. Until I basically have everything in the light shown. But I'm not done yet because you can see I can do things with other things with the lighting here, like I can increase the intensity a little bit. I can even play around with the shadows, such as, certain lights have certain colors of shadow. I can come down here, decay. See, I can even change my shadow color. Now, a good word of mouth, or a good rule to live by here when it comes to basic lighting, is that the color of the light, the invert on the color wheel is the color of the shadow. So what is the opposite color of blue? Is actually orange. So if I actually make the shadow a dark orange, it is the complementary color of the blue. Right? So there I've got my first light, my spotlight. Let's go ahead and create now another light, and this one I'll make it be a directional. Let's go ahead, lift it up, and what can I do again? Panels, look through selected. And this light, let's go ahead and put this from behind like so. And it says what I'm looking through is through a directional light. And this light, because I did a warm key light, let's make or a cool key light, let's make this be a warm. Lower the intensity. I don't want this as intense. And I can even play around again with things like shadows, shadow color. So again, warm light means, a yellowish warm light means that the shadow color can actually be a rather dark purple. But now I need to get to back to my perspective view. So I go to Panels, Perspective, View. And I'm going to make one more light here. And that light is going to be a point light, which I'm just going to set up and move to the back up in the sky like so, just so it's giving off a little bit of light. Again, I can lower the intensity, and I'll just leave it, maybe I'll make it just be a little bit more, like that. So I got a 3-point light system. Because I got that 3-point light system, I could turn on things like shadows now. And if I hit play, you can see it actually is casting shadows on the platform properly. See that? Whereas the key light is giving me a strong shadow, the direct light, which is the fill light, is giving me a slightly lighter shadow, and my backlight is giving me the lightest shadow. Now, let's talk about adding some basic texture, or what I like to call, actually, it's not texture, it's shaders. And shaders right now, just a quick introduction to shaders. If I go with this little blue button, you see I get my shaders. Never, ever touch these shaders. The shaders that it gives us, these are standards. So they're Lambert 1, Particle Cloud 1, etc., Render Surface. These are the defaults. So all geometry you make, every time you make something inside of Maya of geometry, it's going to be that default Lambert. And you notice that everything looks a little colored now because of the lights, even though the Lambert is gray. Now, a little lesson about Lamberts is Lamberts basically give us some attributes. Let me just open this up a little bit. This is called the hyper shade. And you see Lamberts give us attributes here for, come on, color, transparency, ambient color, incandescence, and diffuse. You can also put bump maps. You can also turn on ray tracing. But the secret of Lambert is it does not have reflectivity. It doesn't have a hot spot, a shine point. So it's very limited. Instead, you could use these that are down here, like Blinn or Fong, or even the anisotropic, that are a little bit more advanced shaders. So if I just type in the Blinn, you see it has added a Blinn. And this Blinn, I'm going to make this Blinn, and you can see how it's shiny now. And I will call this the ball. I'll call it ball underscore shady group SG, or you could call it ball Blinn. And I'm going to give this a color. So I click on my color value here, and I can choose my color picker. Maybe I'll give this a nice red. See that? Find it, select the ball, right-click on the red, and I can assign material to selection, and now my ball is red. Let's go ahead. That was a Blinn. Let's play with Fong. And the color of the Fong, let's make it be kind of this light brown color. See, this kind of orange. Let's select our ramp, and I will right-click on this and assign that material to the ramp. So that now our ball has a Blinn, and our Fong is the ramp. I'll call this ramp SG. Now, a few things that I want to do to really make this really look good, though, is over here in the attribute editor. You can see here's my ball SG. I want to activate this thing called Ray Trace. This is how we get old school software render to give us those really neat reflections. Select the ramp, and again, turn on the Ray Trace. Okay? Refractions. That's going to give us reflections and so on. And now I can minimize this, or I can close it out, because we've got some lights in here, we've got some texture or shader colors. Let's see what it looks like. Okay? It's giving us shadow casts. Very cool. All right. Now, I already showed you how we could basically set up the render settings so that our play blast works, right? That's going into this right to the left of our little shader hypershade node is the render settings. And I've already set it up here to be, again, I can give it a name. So let's go ahead and give this a name here, right? So let's call this last name incline renders. We're going to choose Targa. We've got all these other files here, but I really don't want to mess with those because they're not as good as a Targa. Not to mention, a Targa file, this will stay as an alpha. So I could put that against black or any other color to make it look cool. So I'm just going to choose Targa. I'm going to choose frame animation, the last option, name underscore number. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say start frame is 1, yes, but my end frame has changed since the first one. It's now ending at 240. So let's put 240. I am going to make sure that I'm rendering the perspective window, which is, or perspective camera, which is what I've got, and it's going to include the alpha channel. Alpha channel just means, remember, you have red, green, blue, and A alpha. Alpha is the transparency, so that everything back here, all the gray area, is going to be see-through, so I can put it on any background I want. I'm going to double check this is the 1080p, HD 1080, that's 1920 1080. Then I can come over here to the, underneath, after common, go to the software section. If you're not in software, you have to choose that before you do any adjustments to any of these. And here, I'll just change this to be, well, I'll go to high quality. Why not? And high quality just means I get things now like ray tracing, which I can turn on. I can even have motion blur if I want to. Now, every time you turn up these values, your render time is going to get much, much larger. So for this reason, let's just keep the ray tracing, but no motion blur. When we get to some of the other characters, it's really cool. Like if you're having a character doing jumps or even a walk cycle, it's cool to turn on that motion blur. Okay, I like what I got there. I'll hit close. And I can even do a sample render here by going to render current frame. It's the clacker with nothing. And it's going to render that one frame, and you can see what it looks like. You see we get reflections, we get shadows, things are nice and clean and pretty looking. Looks good to me. And this is also a good time, if you wish, if you haven't set project, to set project or, and again, save scene before you do that. So I can even come to save scene as, and I can call this final incline, rendered scene. Hit save, and it goes to our scene file. Now I'm ready to actually render this off into a sequence, which then I can take that sequence into After Effects and convert it to an H.264 Mpeg4 as a really pretty render. To do that, all we need to do is come up here, go to our, where's it at here? Rendering, in the rendering menu set, render, and do what's called a batch render. You're going to see everything kind of stops going, but down at the bottom it says result rendering with Maya software. Now, the newer advanced rendering and lighting system and texturing system inside of Maya is called Arnold. We're going to get to that a little bit later. It's some people consider it to be much more complicated. Others consider it to be actually more easy to use, but we'll get to that at a later point. Right now, I just want to show you the basic software rendering. And you see result, percentage of rendering, and it's now rendering percentage-wise each frame. So frame 9, 10, 11, 12. And if you want to preview it in Maya, you can actually come here to View Sequence, and it knows what folder to look at. See? It knows to look at the folder, and I can hit Open, and it'll give me a temporary F-check, is what the software is, of the process of this rendering. And you see it's frame 7, 8, 9, 10. It's chugging through it. You even see here, you can even see where the alpha channel is, see? So you can see what is visible and what's not visible. You could always go back and reopen it because it's only playing right now. You only have to choose the first frame, but it's only playing how many frames are completed. And it gives you a little playback, frame 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. Now again, I'm rendering in the background, which is why you can see the balls just now starting to move. You get that pretty reflection, you get pretty lighting. It's kind of cool. So that's just the preview of it, right? Let's go ahead and close that. What I want us to do, though, is be able to take these sequences of what are called targas that are rendering out of Maya into After Effects. So let's go ahead and launch After Effects so that we can actually create this as a Mpeg4 video. Remember, you could choose to render as a QuickTime. You can choose to render as an AVI. However, they actually take longer to do because the compression rates are very, very low. meaning it doesn't do a lot of compression. Whereas the Targa, it makes a bunch of Targa images, a sequence that we could actually zip if we wanted to, and we have the highest quality, but it's not a video file, it's a sequence file. So while we're loading the After Effects, you can see down below here, it's now still going, 80%, 90%. Now we're already on frame 46 out of 240. So this does take time. And this is one of those things that one of the best things you can do is work on your assignments, create the scene files, and then when you have nothing left to do and you're ready to call it a day, then you can render. And you can render these things out while you're sleeping or while you're not having to work on your computer, because it does eat a lot of memory on your machine. Now I happen to be using a Dell XPS here, a little 13-inch that's was a $1,000 computer, works pretty well. The general rule is you typically want is a quad-core processor with enough RAM to actually pull this stuff off. Most of the times you can go to the spec sheet from Autodesk and see what it actually takes to run this. I've also been told that many campuses currently have plenty of laptops that you can borrow that should be able to pull this off, specifically if they're a PC, Dell, or something like that. So here I am in After Effects, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit New Project, File, Import File, and I'm going to go hunt down. So let's see, I put that in Module 1, right? Variable incline. Now the scenes is where it saved the scene. Movies are where it saves the play blast, but images, this is where it's saving all of our rendered images. And all I have to do is select the first one again and make sure Targa sequence is on. As long as that Targa sequence is on, it'll load them all as if they are a video. We can just set OK for straight unmatted. And you see here that it's currently brought frame 1 through 75 in. Well, problem is we have 240 frames. And if you recall, 240 frames. Right? So it's gotten to this point here, but it's nowhere near done. But this is where we need to make some changes. A composition setting, let's go back to the 24, see it's 30. We did this at 24 frames per second. And if I still have my open, I know that I did 240 frames at 24 frames per second, which means it's 10 seconds total. So I could change this from being 2, 15 in this case, to being the full 10, 0, 0. And now you'll see it'll let me stretch out my entire composition. But a lot of you are like, okay, but that's great, but you only brought in the first 75 frames. See this? It's because it's rendering in the background. But look at how cool this is. While it's rendering, I can actually right-click on my sequence and reload it. And you see down below, it has added now another 10 frames. So I can work in After Effects while it's actually working. You also notice again that yes, it is up against an alpha channel, which means there is no background. So whether I want to keep it black, which a lot of people say looks cool, I actually prefer to throw in a neutral gray and drop that new gray solid behind it. And you see why. It actually shows up a little better. I can even come in here. Remember, I showed you this in the last one. Last name, assignment 1, I think was this 1-3, which I can call it the complex incline animated ball, right? I could say what is the class, MAAA 232, 3D animation. I could put the date. I could put whatever I want in here. Slide that in there so we know what the hell we're looking at. Let's go ahead and put it on top. Okay. And that's just providing the necessary information to know what the heck we're looking at here. All right, let's go back to our sequence. Right-click and reload again. And you see now it's added another 10, 15 frames. So I could start, like I said, I could be working on this while it's actually still rendering over here in Maya. See? We're up to frame 121, so we're actually halfway there. All right, Tell you what, let me go ahead here and pause until this gets us a lot more. All right, we're back here. I finished the rendering. I kept reloading until it got to 240 frames. I expanded it out. Now you'll notice here it does stop at 8. Now 8 seconds at 24. Remember, we originally told to have 10 seconds. So I can, if I want to, just cut it off here. And I could do that by simply just hitting the N key on the keyboard, which basically moves our composition to the end here. Or I could literally take this target sequence, layer, time, stretch, and stretch it out to 10. I'm going to actually leave it at 8 because that's fast enough. So I'll just hit the N key, lop it off so it ends right there. Let's go back to the beginning and hit the space bar to see the process. And you see that green progress bar is showing us the RAM playback of our ball going up and over. Oh, little bump right there. Now, something that would have been cool here to do, I do see the ball turning and rotating, but I could even put a checkerboard if I wanted to on there. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But in the end here, we basically get the performance we're after. We got our name on it. It's nice, pretty renders. All we'd have to do again is go to the media encoder, launch our media encoder, and then choose it to render as an H.264 high quality 1920 1080 Mpeg4 video. And that is what we would upload, of course, to the assignment folder in the Bright Space Shell. Let that go. So here's our media encoder again. You give it a second to sync up with After Effects, and the file will pop up right here to change the format, the presets, the output, name, location, all that. There it is. Click on the H.264 or whatever this first button says. It's doing its dynamic Adobe link. It's taking a little time. Like it to, but that's okay. Again, we're working with video now, guys, and video does take time. You can imagine how long it took just to render 240 frames of a ball rolling down a little, ramp. Imagine if this was like Transformers and you're having to render out two giant robots fighting each other with reflections and motion blur and all that. This is why the industry, they use what are called render farms, which are basically warehouses full of render servers. That means they can do, maybe 1,000 frames an hour, where each frame takes maybe 8 hours to render. We don't have that kind of ability to do that faster rendering on our little desktops or our little laptops here. Even if we are on campus, it still is a timely task. It doesn't just happen. That's why the more things you activate, turn on, motion blur, reflection, pretty texturing, all that stuff, more detail, everything adds to it. Every keyframe takes memory and takes time. All right, so we got it finally open here. Again, change it to an H.264 format. Preset, we can match source high bit rate. That's perfectly fine. Output name is a big one. This is where you need to make sure you're changing the proper name. And you see it wants to go to my local temp because I have not saved my After Effects file yet. So make sure we go to the proper module, the proper file. Again, I can put it in movies, or I can put it into final projects, or wherever I want it to go. In fact, I'm going to put it back as just into module 1. I'm going to call it last name incline renders. Hit save and hit OK. Nothing happens though until we hit the green button. And this is now going to take the sequence of renders that we had in Maya, brought into After Effects, added our name, put in a light gray background or a black background, really doesn't matter, And now we're rendering it into an H.264 video format. And you see how quick it is once it actually gets loaded in here. That's why, again, everything streaming, uploading, and downloading now is Mpeg4. It's much better than a QuickTime, much better than an AVI. Let's go ahead, now that that's done, clear out our queue. I'll just delete the queue, minimize that. Here's my After Effects, I can minimize that. Let's go ahead and then look at the final result. Module 1, I put it right here, double click, and again, we can see the real-time performance of it. See? And that's pretty much it. Pretty cool. All right, well, that's all I got for this one, guys. Oh, that's right. One more thing I wanted to show you just for the heck of it is, let's go back to Maya since I do have that open. Go ahead and minimize that. I'll go and choose 6. Let's go ahead and choose 7 so I get it exactly what it looked like before. And I'm going to do one more thing just for the heck of it here. Watch this. I'm going to go into my red shader because you noticed it really didn't give us a very good-looking rotating sphere. And under the color, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose this option box here, and I'm going to choose checker. And you see the result there. If I want to, I could leave it black and white, whatever. And you see now our ball has now gotten a texture, but we have to make sure that this texture box is on. See? And now you can actually see it rotate a little bit better because we put a texture, a little tiny grid texture on that. See? Gives us a little bit more reality of the rotation, a little bit more visible notification. So again, you could do that as well and play around that. So again, what did we do today? We learned how, this video, we learned how to create lighting, add shaders, render the high quality version using software renderability, how to use After Effects to then put it all together, get it to an H.264 video, and then you get that video then that you can upload. So that's all I got here. I will see you guys on the next video element.